coming back to your essentially search methodology, I mean, do you, I know that at the beginning you started like relatively large, like, B2B, like certain size. So in terms of, let's say, production, and did you have access to specific databases where you started analyzing like big pools of companies, trying to understand in what sort of industry would be more interesting to focus, etc. So how, if you can explain, I know there is a lot of information you want to keep for yourself, but in terms of, high level methodology, in terms of how you run your, let's say, first phase of the search, how does it work, or what did you do and how did you do it?
Yeah. Yeah. So essentially we do have access to databases. So the way it works, the two of us agree on a specific sector.
Mm.
So what we tend to do is we constantly analyze global trends, global drivers, and sectors that to some extent fulfill some of the criteria that I had mentioned before, that you have some sort of recurringness, that you have decent margins, that you have decent levels of capital investments. And essentially those drive our analysis. Once we find a specific sector, as an example, if we say, specialty logistics is interesting, then we would
Mhm.
go onto the database. We can filter for either the sector or we can filter based on keywords. And then we get out a
So
list.
initially you do like the homework to analyze like big market trends. When you are convinced by a specific market and the market trends, then you start analyzing companies.
Exactly. So we take the top-down approach based on the mega trends and based on the risk that we see, and also to some extent based on our inspiration for that sector and for the business model within those sectors, because it needs to be something that we both feel passionate about or where we see ourselves for the next 3 years. And then we filter for that industry within the database. And then to further bring down the list of targets, we put on additional filters. So, no parent company that owns the business, no more than 5 shareholders within the business, just because that makes it more complicated. Ideally, not PE backed or not VC backed. And then we try to filter by financial numbers. But in most cases in Germany, under German GAAP, you're not required to display, your P&L to some extent, or not your top line. So we try to filter more by total balance sheet size or by employee numbers. And then we get a list of, let's say, 200 targets. We contact them either by email or by letters, and essentially introduce ourselves. We put in one call to action within that letter, like, a specific question. Have you thought about where your business will be in the next 10 years or
Mhm.
something else? And then we do continuous follow-ups. So we would send 4 emails within 1 month after every 7 days to make sure, because essentially the response rate increases the more emails you send.
So you have a
Mm.
proper like sales machine, let's say, in getting your leads. Okay,
Exactly.
understood. And do you find like, balance sheet numbers well correlated to what you are looking for in terms of financial performance, or not so good?
I would say 2/3 of the time, yes. There needs to be some carefulness around filtering by balance sheet size, just because by default, you do exclude asset-light business models, the ones that don't have any assets, on the balance sheet,
Mm.
or low assets. So there is to some extent a correlation. It is a good starting point, but it doesn't tell the entire story. So there are specific points within the balance sheet that in some cases, like retained earnings, those are positions that might give you a bit of a better indication on how profitable the business has been
Mhm.
run.
And so do you have any other outside signals you're looking at which you think are good pointers? The number of employees could be a good indication. Do you have other like things you could easily look at, or not really?
The only other KPI you can look at are the number of employees.
Mhm.
So most of the time, if a business has 5 employees, the likelihood that that business generates, 5 or 10 million revenues is fairly low. We have seen it before. It does happen. We've seen a company with 5 employees that generates 12 million revenues, but that's the
Mhm.
exception. So,
And
so
maybe
most
they
of the
don't want to
time, those
sell.
are, yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you make those numbers with that amount
Yeah.
of employees, you're pretty happy.